Welcome to another edition of Just Facts Combat. Quick picks. This week we're covering UFC 313, featuring the highly anticipated title fight between Pereira and Ankalaev. Both men have vowed to finish each other, so let's hope it lives up to the hype. As for the first fight of the night, it's Djorden Santos versus Ozzy Diaz. My pick for this one is Djorden Santos. Diaz tends to be too passive, only committing to strikes when he has space, otherwise reacting to his opponents. This plays right into Santos' style, as Diaz's defensive and offensive flaws give him trouble against aggressive fighters. Diaz doesn't set up his strikes well and often keeps his chin high. He's only really defensively sound when on the back foot, and even then, he leaves himself open, as we saw when Zhang put him down. This time, he's returning to middleweight after being stopped by Joe Pyfer, and I feel Santos has enough aggression and technical skills to cause problems for him. While Santos isn't the biggest puncher like Pyfer or Zhang, I expect him to wear Diaz down with his pressure and grappling. Diaz will likely try to counter, but I see him falling behind. Santos will push him to the cage, landing strikes and grappling, while Diaz spends most of the fight defending. I expect Santos to win a wide decision, though a TKO could be possible if one lands a solid shot. However, I see this going the distance with Santos winning by decision. My prediction: Djorden Santos via decision. This is a last-minute fight the UFC put together after both fighters' original matchups fell through. Fortunately, both were already in fight camp and should be in peak condition. Castaneda now faces a more passive, technical opponent in Chris Gutierrez, who excels at fighting from range and countering, very different from the aggressive Andrade, whom Castaneda was originally preparing for. Meanwhile, Gutierrez was set to fight Gene Matsumoto, a younger and arguably better fighter than Castaneda. Fight breakdown. I'm leaning toward Gutierrez to get the win. Castaneda's biggest issue here is his lack of leg kick defense, which is a major problem against one of the best leg kickers in the division. Castaneda relies heavily on movement to pressure opponents and evade counters, but I expect Gutierrez to chew up his legs early, forcing him into uncomfortable stances and limiting his mobility. Even if Castaneda starts strong, outlanding Gutierrez early, he'll walk into counters and eat damaging leg kicks in the process. Once his movement slows, Gutierrez will take over, controlling range and landing the cleaner, more significant strikes. While Castaneda could try to push the pace and disrupt Gutierrez's rhythm, his poor defense makes him vulnerable to punishment. Final prediction: Chris Gutierrez by decision. Both fighters are neither high volume nor power strikers, so I don't expect a finish. Castaneda could make it competitive by outworking Gutierrez, but ultimately, I see Gutierrez landing the more effective strikes and breaking him down over time. Mairon Santos is a top-tier prospect, but I'm picking Francis Marshall to win this fight. Santos hasn't been truly battle-tested, and his grappling has holes that Marshall can exploit. I see Marshall applying constant pressure, using his hands to trap Santos, who will be on the back foot countering. Once he closes the distance, Marshall can shoot for takedowns, and although Santos defends takedowns from a distance, Marshall does a good job setting them up with his pressure. Can Santos keep Marshall at bay and land heavy shots? Absolutely. This could slow Marshall's offense and help Santos defend the takedowns. But in a firefight, I favor Marshall's pressure to wear Santos down, trap him, and score eye-catching takedowns. Santos relies too much on his jab in boxing, making him a one-dimensional target for Marshall. I believe Marshall will do enough to sway the judges and win a decision. If he can close the distance, he may even hurt or finish Santos, as Santos tends to drop his hands, leaving him open for a well-timed shot. I wouldn't be surprised if Santos lands the flashier strikes but gets overwhelmed by Marshall's pressure, possibly even getting robbed of a decision due to casual fans undervaluing grappling in MMA. Still, I lean towards Marshall winning, though I'm not fully confident. Santos can win, but I need to see more from him before I can back him confidently. For now, I think he falls short. If you're looking for a technical brawl with some casual MMA grappling breaks, this is your fight. Both Leal and Morono love to stand and trade, and I expect them to do just that for much of the fight. However, there are key differences between them. Leal is a forward pressure fighter, looking to take control early, while Morono tends to match his opponent's aggression. If Leal pushes forward, Morono will likely try to counter, but he's also comfortable being the aggressor. Both fighters are similar in many ways, but Morono has the edge in grappling. If he takes the fight to the ground, he could have success, but he's more likely to engage in a stand-up battle. Neither fighter is likely to rely heavily on grappling, but it may come into play at times. My pick is Carlos Leal. Although he might absorb more strikes than Morono, I believe Leal has the cleaner technique and will outstrike Morono in the stand-up exchanges. Morono's chin will likely be tested here, as both are durable, but both also get hit a lot. The striking exchanges should be close, but Leal has a slight power edge, which could help him land the more impactful shots and win a decision. If Morono comes on strong in the later rounds, he might give Leal some trouble, but I see Leal doing enough to sway the judges. A TKO finish could happen for either fighter, but I lean toward Leal landing it if it comes to that. While Morono's power is dangerous, Leal has a solid chin and less wear and tear, so he should have the edge in the striking exchanges. He'll also be able to defend well enough in the grappling to prevent Morono from gaining control. Given that control time is less impactful in modern scoring, I don't see it being a way for Morono to win, especially if he's eating heavier shots on the feet. Ferreira has powerful knockout ability, capable of taking out most opponents if he lands cleanly. However, like many heavy-handed strikers, he's flat-footed and vulnerable to counters. I believe he's an easy target for someone like Petrosyan, who will likely use his jab to keep Ferreira at bay and pick him apart from a distance. While Ferreira may try to trap Petrosyan or bait him into exchanges, Petrosyan's fighting style seems well suited to avoiding this, allowing him to control the pace of the fight from the back foot. We might see some close exchanges, but overall, I think Petrosyan will stay outside of Ferreira's striking range and avoid getting caught. Ferreira will likely focus on leg kicks and closing the distance, but Petrosyan's style is tough for Ferreira to handle. Though I'm not entirely confident, I'm picking Armen Petrosyan to outpoint Ferreira and win by decision. This is a tough call, as both fighters have clear paths to victory. Joshua Van, a skilled boxer and pressure fighter, could dominate Tsuruya on the feet. Tsuruya's striking is wild, with his hands out and little setup, which leaves him open to counters. Against Van, the best striker he's faced, those mistakes could be costly. I can see Van hurting him in the pocket and finishing the job. But this is MMA, and Tsuruya makes up for his striking deficiencies with elite grappling and relentless wrestling. Van has shown some vulnerability against pressure grapplers but is also tough to take down and keep down. However, Tsuruya excels at chain wrestling and control, and Van has never faced someone who can force him to grapple for extended periods. If Tsuruya gets him down, I see him staying ahead in the exchanges. Final pick? I'm siding with Rei Tsuruya due to his ability to control opponents once he gets them down. Joshua Van has solid takedown defense and grappling, but we've seen him struggle against strong wrestlers who can ground him. Could Van stuff most of Tsuruya's takedowns and land a KO shot? Absolutely, but with the amount of grappling he'll have to deal with, it'll be tough for him to find those openings. I expect Tsuruya to close the distance, impose his grappling, and keep Van on the defensive. Once on the ground, Van will likely spend most of the fight fighting off submissions and looking for ways to escape. Even in today's MMA climate, where judges often favor damage over control, Tsuruya's dominance should be too clear to ignore, though stranger decisions have happened. That said, Van's grappling has improved, and this fight will test just how much. However, Tsuruya's ground game is too diverse, and once he establishes control, Van will struggle to regain momentum. Final prediction: Rei Tsuruya by decision or submission. The sub-prop is tempting, but I expect Van's defense to hold up. This is a bad stylistic matchup for Rizvan Kuniev. He's facing a far more experienced and well-rounded fighter in Blaydes, who not only outstrikes him but can also match his wrestling. Considering Kuniev's level of competition is nowhere near Blaydes, I see Blaydes not just winning, but finishing him. Kuniev thrives when he can pressure opponents, trap them against the fence, or take them down. However, Blaydes is a superior wrestler and can turn those exchanges into offense of his own. Kuniev also leaves himself open in the pocket when closing the distance, which is where Blaydes' boxing will shine. I see Blaydes catching him coming in and knocking him out, likely within the first 2 rounds. If Kuniev starts desperately shooting for takedowns after struggling on the feet, he'll make a fatal mistake. Final prediction: Blaydes by TKO, but a decision is possible. Got a friend who only watches boxing and doesn't like MMA? Have them watch this fight. Both Ruffy and Bobby Green are heavily boxing-oriented. Mauricio Ruffy fights with a Conor McGregor-esque style, while Bobby Green is a flashy boxer known for his hands-down approach. I expect fun pocket exchanges and creative setups, but Green has been figured out. His hands-low stance makes his strikes unpredictable, and his head movement is slick, but his biggest flaw is his reliance on it. He rarely puts his hands up, leaving his chin exposed. Even Floyd Mayweather knew when to guard his head. This has led to him getting laid out multiple times, with only his counter-offense keeping opponents in check. Ruffy is also hittable but defends better than Green and does a great job setting up his shots. Given Green's age and accumulated damage, I see Ruffy cracking his chin within the first 2 rounds. Once that happens, Green's legs will be gone, and I don't see him recovering. That said, if they settle into a more technical boxing match, we could see a fun fight that goes the distance. Final prediction: Mauricio Ruffy by TKO, with a decision prop as a backup. This is another tough fight to call on a card full of close matchups. We might even see a rare finish in a women's fight, adding to the unpredictability. Amanda Lemos is the more experienced, polished striker with superior power. She has faced far better competition and can hold her own in boxing exchanges. Lucindo, while solid offensively, is far too easy to hit, especially when closing the distance. We saw Lemos finish Rodriguez this way, and I can see her doing the same to Lucindo, who was also rocked by Rodriguez in their fight. However, Lucindo has a grappling edge. She brings a wrestling-heavy approach, which isn't common for Brazilian fighters, making it harder for opponents to prepare for. Lemos has improved in defensive wrestling but tends to stay on her back too long, playing jiu-jitsu instead of scrambling to her feet. If Lucindo commits to her wrestling, she could control Lemos and grind out a decision. That said, I'm siding with Lemos. She is too dangerous early, and Lucindo's go-to trip takedowns may not be enough to ground her. If Lemos stuffs them and keeps the fight standing, Lucindo could become a sitting duck for a finish. Lucindo's best path is mixing in strikes and timing takedowns better to slow Lemos down and wear on her. If she can do that, she has a real shot at pulling off the win. But at 36, the real question is, how much does Lemos have left? Final prediction: Amanda Lemos by TKO or decision, but it's a low confidence pick. I wouldn't be shocked if Lucindo does enough to sway the judges, but I'll back the veteran to bounce back. Turner has the same issue in every fight. He looks great in round 1, but gasses himself out and then either gets finished or beaten up. I don't see this fight playing out any differently. He's stuck between weight classes. His power doesn't translate as well at welterweight, but he kills himself to make lightweight, which wrecks his cardio. Meanwhile, Ignacio is comfortable at this weight, has excellent cardio, and can push a pace that Turner simply can't keep up with. While Turner's striking is dangerous early, Ignacio has to avoid getting clipped, as he does tend to get hit. However, if he survives the first round, Turner's power threat fades, and Ignacio takes over. I also see Turner attempting to grapple to conserve energy, but Ignacio's takedown defense has improved significantly. Opponents no longer take him down and keep him there with ease. I expect Turner to be forced into a striking battle, where he'll fall behind as the fight progresses. Final prediction: Ignacio by decision or late TKO. With Hooker out, we're getting a rematch we never expected, Gaethje vs Fiziev 2, but with new variables that make it much harder to predict. Gaethje is coming off a brutal KO loss to Holloway, raising questions about his chin and whether he'll hesitate to engage in his usual reckless wars. He's even admitted he'll feel some fear at the start. On the other side, Fiziev is returning from a serious ACL injury and is stepping in on short notice. How in shape is he? Can he handle Gaethje's relentless pressure for 3 rounds? One thing I'm confident about: Gaethje won't be taking Fiziev down again. Fiziev's takedown defense looked excellent against Gamrot, and in fact, he may surprise everyone by attempting takedowns himself. He stated he doesn't want to get hit as much as in the first fight, so expect a more calculated approach from him. Prediction: I'm siding with Justin Gaethje. Fiziev has a tougher hill to climb, coming in on short notice, returning from injury, and possibly taking this fight for financial reasons. Gaethje has had a full camp, and while he's coming off a KO loss, he's been knocked out before and knows how to adjust. I expect a slower start, with both men feeling each other out. Gaethje will likely close the distance to neutralize Fiziev's kicking game, pick his shots wisely, and exit the pocket before Fiziev counters. Fiziev, with his speed and reflexes, will land his own counters, making for exciting exchanges. I don't expect much wrestling, but if anyone shoots, it'll likely be Fiziev, realizing early that Gaethje won't take him down. I see this playing out as more of a technical chess match, with Fiziev getting hit less than in their first fight but still struggling to land enough volume. Final prediction: Justin Gaethje by decision, likely split. However, if Fiziev's conditioning fails him, Gaethje could turn up the pace and score a late finish, but I lean toward the fight going the distance. We all know how Alex Pereira wins, using his elite kickboxing with minimal concern for grappling. But for once, he's facing an opponent who won't let him get away with that. Magomed Ankalaev isn't interested in proving a point by striking with Alex. He plans to exploit his wrestling and grappling weaknesses, something many of Pereira's past opponents failed to do out of ego. This seems to have rattled Alex, who initially tried to avoid this fight by pushing for a move to heavyweight. He knows Ankalaev has the tools to beat him and, more importantly, the intent to do so. How this fight plays out. Path to victory for Alex: he chews up Ankalaev's lead leg early, using range to punish him every time he pressures forward. If Ankalaev's leg gets compromised, his wrestling becomes ineffective, leaving him a sitting duck for Pereira's left hook, which has 5 rounds to find the target. Path to victory for Alex: he chews up Ankalaev's lead leg early, using him a sitting duck for Pereira's left hook, which has 5 rounds to find the target. Path to victory for Ankalaev: more likely, he uses the constant threat of takedowns to limit Alex's kicking game, forcing him to hesitate. Alex will try to counter, but this is dangerous against a wrestler who can feint, bait reactions, and shoot the moment Alex commits to a strike. If Ankalaev establishes the takedown threat, he can start landing big shots on Pereira, who relies on range rather than actual defensive fundamentals. In the pocket, Alex drops his hands to defend takedowns, leaving him vulnerable to a fight-ending bomb. Final prediction: Magomed Ankalaev by TKO within 3 rounds. If it goes to a decision, it'll be because Ankalaev ragdolls Pereira for most of the fight, forcing him to defend from his back. While Ankalaev typically prioritizes control over damage, Pereira's lack of experience in grueling wrestling matches could drain him, opening the door for a late ground and pound finish.